Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call to order our subcommittee meeting on general government. Mr. Clerk, if you would.
Chair Braybeck.
Here.
Representatives Hood.
Present.
Puri. Here. O'Neill.
President.
Steckloff.
Present.
Menser.
Here.
Boland.
Here.
Leitner. Kuhn. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I appreciate it. Rep. Boland moves to excuse absent members without any objections. All absent members are excused. And Representative Steckloff moves to approve the minutes from the previous meeting, and without any objections, those minutes are approved. So, folks, we have our last presentation. It's so great to see a full house in general government. We're happy you're all here. This is our last presentation day. So thank you for doing all this learning along with me. Today we're going to have three presentations. We're going to hear from the State Lottery. We're going to hear from MDCR, our Civil Rights Division, and we're going to hear from DTMB. I'd first love to call up Lottery. We have a newly appointed director, Susanna. There, good. Good morning. Come on up, please. We're happy that you're here, and I'm sure that there will be questions. I know that there were before, but we'd love to be able to hear from you first. Welcome.
Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair Braybeck and honorable members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today to discuss the lottery's performance and fiscal year 2025 budget. I also just wanted to thank you for your flexibility in scheduling. This was initially scheduled for an earlier time, I think the second day of my appointment, so I appreciate the flexibility. My name is Susanna Shkreli. I'm the newly appointed commissioner of the State Lottery. Today with me I have Christina McDermott, Joe Freilich, and Mike Gallagher sitting in the back. So if I'm unable to answer any of your questions, I know the brain trust behind me will. I'd like to first start off with the fact that Michigan Lottery is 100% self-funded. We do not draw upon general fund dollars. We bring in billions of dollars in revenue every year. The revenue generated is largely given back to the people of the state of Michigan in one of three ways. First, to the school aid fund to benefit our kids. Second, to businesses in our state, many of them small businesses in the form of commissions. And third, in prizes to Michiganders who play our fun and entertaining games of chance. A very small sum of the revenue goes towards our operation costs. Our ask today is not so much, I'd like to say, for an appropriation, but more for permission or authorization to spend the money that we're making to keep this really good thing going. The lottery was established in 1972 for the purpose of generating revenue for Michigan schools. It operates much like a private sector business, selling its products in highly competitive retail and online environments. Lottery is completely self-funded. It receives no general fund or tax dollars, and all profits go to benefit the school aid fund. Our mission is to maximize net revenues to supplement state education programs, provide fun and entertaining games of chance, and operate all games and bureau functions with nothing less than total integrity. Last year, the lottery contributed more than $1.3 billion to the school aid fund. This was Lottery's second largest contribution in its 51-year history, and fifth consecutive contribution of more than $1 billion. Since operations began in 1972, Lottery has raised more than $28 billion for Michigan schools, with more than $6.2 billion being contributed to the school aid fund in the last 5 years alone. Lottery players claimed more than $3.1 billion in prizes in fiscal year 2023, and prizes are Lottery's largest expense, accounting for about 61 cents of each dollar spent by players. On the topic of responsible gaming, the Michigan Lottery is leading the way. Our total annual spend in this area is more than $1.3 million, which includes memberships and certifications to national organizations which are subject to rigorous standards and evaluated by surveyors. We're committed to promoting responsible gaming and to providing lottery players with a safe and fun gaming experience. And we do so by weaving responsible gaming efforts throughout our operations. We've implemented numerous best practices that ensure vitality of our responsible gaming program, including employee and retailer training, public education and awareness, product oversight, research and evaluation, and also in our advertising. Michigan was the first state lottery to receive certification of its online program through the National Council on Problem Gambling and has also attained responsible gaming verification through the North American Association of State and Provincial Lotteries. Our licensed lottery retailers across Michigan received more than $350 million in commission payments in fiscal year 2023. Lotteries retailers can take advantage of a number of incentives, including the 6% sales commission on sales, 1% for meeting sales goals, 1% for accepting debit and credit cards, 2% on paying prizes, and a bonuses of up to $50,000 for selling higher tier winning tickets. The total commission and incentive payments to retailers have increased by 72% since fiscal year 2015, which was the first year retailers collected more than $200 million in commissions. Michigan continues to be one of the highest paying lotteries in the nation for retailers. The lottery also serves an important regulatory purpose. The Charitable Gaming Division of the lottery oversees the licensing and regulation of charitable gaming activities that have raised tens of millions of dollars for local nonprofit organizations in fiscal year 2023 alone. The Charitable Gaming Division is also self-funded through licensing fees and charity game ticket sales, and any revenue in excess of program costs is dispersed annually to the state's general fund. In 2023, the Charitable Gaming Division deposited more than $7.5 million into the general fund. The Michigan Lottery is 100% self-funded through generated revenue, and the hardworking people of the Bureau continue to forge ahead with innovation and creativity, which is resulting in record-breaking investments in our school aid fund. And I am happy to join them build upon that success. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Director. We appreciate it. Minority Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, and welcome. Thank you. And thank you very much for being here. So in lottery, do we have more losers than winners?
I like to say to my team that everybody's a winner when they're playing the Michigan State Lottery, because if you don't win on your ticket, the money that you spend is going to the school aid fund. But if your question is about specific odds, I would have to crunch some numbers and get back to you.
All right. Well, I ask this because I often get asked from a couple of judges in my county, like, why don't we really advertise that there are more losers than winners to discourage people who have gambling habits. But how has your outreach, or have you seen an increase in what you have to do for public education? I realize this is the lottery and not the sports gambling and internet gaming, but have you seen an increase in gambling addiction in lottery as a result?
So you pose a very valid question and a good one. We pride ourselves in having a really robust, responsible gaming program. And so in the digital space, like you mentioned, I think things can escalate. And so that's why we've incorporated a number of tools that help our players kind of recognize that they may have a problem, right? There's a cooling off period. You can self-exclude yourself for a certain amount of time from the app, the Michigan Lottery app. There is limits on deposits that you can place into your account. There are loss limits that you can place on yourself as well. And you can also keep yourself off the website completely for a period of time. So we also don't have an auto spin. This is a automatic tool that online users use where it just keeps spinning. That's not a tool that we have in our state. And even in our advertising, we let the players know that the best bet is knowing their limits. And if they have issues, they can reach out to DHHS specifically for problem gambling. You're welcome.
Representative Mentzer.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions. You talked about the increase in sales, Michigan being one of the highest states. So I'm wondering why in Treasury we have $1 million in state lottery fund to support efforts to sell and promote lottery products. And then we also have, under lottery operations, concludes $540,800 in restricted funding for lottery operations. $405,800 would be used to support sales and promotion. So I don't understand why we're spending, $1.5 million to promote sales when we're already one of the leading, states for selling lottery tickets anyway.
Yes, thank you for your question. We are in a ever-changing market, and so we have to remain nimble and flexible as it relates to advertising. You have to spend money to make money, and that's exactly what we're trying to do in our advertising. If you look at the return of investment with how much money we're spending, we're seeing ratios of 34-to-1 and 2-to-1. So the money that we are spending for advertising is making a difference. And if you are to compare other platforms, especially the online platforms, we really pale in comparison in how much money we're spending towards advertising. We need to stay flexible. We need to keep this good thing going, generating revenue for the school aid fund.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Is Tom okay? Any questions online? Okay. Thank you, Director. Welcome.
Thank you so
We're
much.
happy that you're here. Thank you for your presentation and giving us the answers to those questions.
Thank you so much. I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, next we will have Director Johnson. Good morning, Director. Happy to have you and your team here. I'll let you introduce your team, but colleagues, this is MDCR. Again, presentation in front of you and on the screen.
All right. Good morning. My name is John Johnson, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Department of Civil Rights. And good morning, Madam Chair and the rest of this committee. We appreciate you taking the time to allow us to present to you this morning in regards to the fiscal year 25 budget. I am accompanied here in this room this morning by, to my immediate right, our Deputy Executive Director, Attorney Kimberly Woolridge. I'm also accompanied by the Director of our Enforcement Division, Marcelina Trevino. She's also an attorney. Our Budget and Management Services Director, Mr. Abdel Ali, and then our Legislative Liaison, Dr. Jerome Reed. I will start the presentation, make some introductory remarks. Deputy Executive Woolridge will take over and talk a little bit about the agency, and then Attorney Trevino will come up and talk about enforcement, which is the core function of our agency. As you know, we're a law enforcement agency, and primarily most of our staff is devoted to the enforcement of the civil rights laws here in Michigan. We shortened our presentation because we were with you before last year, and you know that you're aware of our agency. So I just wanted to remind you that we have a constitutional mandate to do what we do, and is contained in Article 5, Section 29 of the Michigan Constitution. Also remind you that the governor appoints the members of our commission, and they are approved by the Senate. And our current commission is full. We have our 8 members. Our current chair is Gloria Lara. She's out of the Grand Rapids area. Our vice chair is David Worthams out of Kalamazoo. Our secretary is Luke Londo out of Hazel Park. And then other members include Portia Roberson, Zena El Hassan, Richard Corvu, Regina Gasco, and Roseanne Barker. The commission has adopted some priorities for this year. I want to talk about them just for a minute. One of them is voting rights. We have a voting rights project in which we have engaged in social media, working with other agencies and other community groups throughout the state, indicating that voting is a civil right. We want to make sure that we address persons with disabilities, their access to the ballot, persons with limited English proficiency, and also their rights. So we're engaged in a year-long project, again, mandated by our Commission on Voting Rights. We also adopted diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically artificial intelligence, as another priority of the Commission. We see our artificial intelligence as one of the new obstacles in terms of racial discrimination, not just racial discrimination, but discrimination that we see emerging in the areas of employment, financial services, housing. We will be having a civil rights summit later this year. We're in the process now of having public hearings on fair housing issues, culminating in a civil rights summit in June, which will be addressing discrimination in the housing area. One of the areas we'll be focusing on is artificial intelligence and how it affects those in the housing area. That is, again, one of the Commission's priorities, and also juvenile justice. We'll be looking at that from a school-to-prison pipeline perspective in terms of the racial discrimination and persons and students with disabilities that might affect. We're also involved in several key task forces, and they're listed there. The Poverty Task Force, Agency Migrant Services Commission, MCOs, Homeland Protection Board, Council for Government and Education on Equity and Inclusion, and our Ethnic Intimidation Amendment Work Group. I will end at this point and ask our Deputy Executive Director to take over.
Thank you, Director Johnson, and thank you. Director Johnson started with the department in July of 2021 as interim director, acting director, and he was then appointed executive director by the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. He leads an agency of 135 staff and growing. And it's constitutionally mandated to enforce both the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act and the Michigan Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act to prevent discrimination through community engagement, education, enforcement, and equity. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights was created in 1965 to support the work of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. MDCR's executive office is in Detroit, and the staff is also deployed in Lansing, Grand Rapids, and we have a one-person Marquette office currently. We have 69 bargaining unit employees in the enforcement division. MDCR's services that are provided are with the enforcement division for investigation of discrimination complaints under state and federal laws, with our partnerships with the EEOC and HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Education and training, that's external trainings and external trainings on discrimination, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, intercultural developments, inventory coaching, implicit bias, hate bias, and other trainings. Community engagement, including hate bias awareness campaigns. We have monthly hate bias awareness campaigns and the annual My Response to Hate conference. ALPAC, Advocates and Leaders for Police and Community Trust. Training, guidance, and assistance on disability rights and compliance. Contract compliance. Services to the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing community. The Voluntary Service Animal ID and Patch Program, and our annual Civil Rights Summit that Director Johnson mentioned this year. It is focusing on housing. So, Elliott Larson and Persons with Disability provides protections against and investigations of alleged discrimination in employment, education, housing, public accommodation, and public service. It is unlawful to discriminate against any person based on religion, race, and race includes hair texture and protective hairstyles with the Crown Act that was recently enacted. Color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, disability, age, marital status, familial status, height, weight, and arrest record and employment, and genetic information. It is unlawful to retaliate against someone because they bring a complaint of discrimination or who exercises their right under these laws. So the department's makeup consists of, it was mentioned earlier, offices in Detroit, Lansing, Grand Rapids, and Marquette. Our operational structure includes the executive office, the enforcement division, the public affairs division, the division on deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing, IT, and museums. So with the addition of this recommended $5 million from the governor's budget, that would bring MDCR's budget to $32.3 million. That would be $29.3 million in general funds, $2.8 million in federal funds. That's what, with our EEOC and HUD contracts, $18,700 in private funds, and $58,500 in state restricted funds. So the governor's recommended fiscal year budget contains an additional $5 million for complaint investigation and enforcement to reduce the backlog of discrimination cases and complete investigations in a timely manner. And our number of cases, while we're handling our backlog, we're also getting more cases in. So it's steadily increasing. Marcelina Trevino, who is the Director of Enforcement, will discuss that momentarily. Discrimination is protected against federal and state protected classes, and I mentioned those classes earlier. And complainants may file discrimination claims based on the areas of jurisdiction that I mentioned earlier: employment, education, housing, public accommodation, public service, and law enforcement. This support will enable the department to deploy 3 additional teams statewide to investigate claims of discrimination, and builds upon the $5.7 million ongoing investment made in the current fiscal year, the 2024 fiscal year. Now I will turn it over to Ms. Trevino to discuss the Enforcement Division.
Thank you, Deputy Executive Director Woolridge. So I'm going to get into a little bit about enforcement and what we do starting from the beginning. In order for someone to file a certified complaint with our department, they must file within 180 days of making the complaint. MDCR will prepare a certified complaint for the customer claimant to sign, date, and return to MDCR. Once we receive a timely signed complaint, it goes on our docket and moves from our intake unit to our investigative teams. At that time, a copy of that complaint is sent both to the claimant and the respondent, and MDCR will conduct an impartial investigation. So one of the questions that came to us was, what makes a meritorious complaint? Here's just an example, but MDCR is a law enforcement agency that investigates allegations of unlawful discrimination using the legal elements that are based off of the Michigan model of jury instructions. In addition, investigative report templates are used by staff to assist with investigating and evaluating complaints on a case-by-case basis that are all fact-specific. For example, up on the screen, you'll see an element guide template for a disparate treatment case in employment. So what our investigators look for and at is, 1, whether the claimant is a member of the protected class that Deputy Executive Director mentioned previously. Was the claimant qualified for a position? So were they in their position rightfully and hired? Was the claimant subjected to some sort of adverse action? So was there some type of harm? And some examples of harm would be a discharge, a demotion, some type of discipline, or being treated differently than others, so other terms and conditions of their employment. Our investigators then look to whether similarly situated people of different protected classes are treated more favorably or different than the claimant. And then, did the respondent have a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for his actions? And then looking to that to see if the respondent's reasoning is pretextual. So that is what we look for. I do want to mention, too, because a claimant comes to our department, they have chosen the venue of the administrative law process. We use the legal elements as well because they also they may choose to go into the courts rather than the administrative law process, and we use the same elements and analyze cases similarly. In addition, in appeal, it also would go to circuit court, and so that is why legal elements are used in our investigative process. So just to give you a little bit of a recap of what we did in fiscal year 23, this enforcement division completed 1,368 complaints of discrimination, and we secured almost $400,000 in settlements for claimants. Some of the formal complaints that were filed by area, as has been the case in previous years, a majority of them are in employment at 56, almost 57%, then followed by public service and public accommodation at 20%, housing at 13, almost 14%, law enforcement, as well as education at almost 5%. So when we're looking at the bases of why people file with us and the protected bases, you'll see, and this has been pretty much the same and similar in the past, as our two top are one being race, filing under race, and then right under is disability. Those are our two primary bases. Then followed by retaliation at 16%, sex at 14%, and then you can see in the graph those numbers falling off due to other protected bases. When we talk about reporting and metrics, MDCR tracks its contacts, meaning any contact that is made to the department where someone would like to file a complaint, whether it is jurisdictional or not. It is documented in our Civil Rights Information System, which we call CRIS. Any contact that comes in to the intake unit is documented in CRIS. All enforcement staff document the progress of complaints and investigations in CRIS. Our forms and documents, including our investigative reports, are also tracked that allows us to track metrics that I mentioned previously. This also includes summary of complaints, which are letters that claimants receive if they have non-jurisdictional issues that we can investigate. Certified complaints, investigative reports, etc., are all drafted and finalized in CRIS. We're currently also working on a public-facing portal and a data visualization tool, and that was included in our fiscal year 2024 IT budget, and that continues to be in process. So if there are any questions, we're open to taking those now.
Thank you so much. I think that there are going to be, so, he does or does not? Oh, okay, perfect. All right. Rep. Menser.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the executive budget recommendation, and that adds 29 staffers and $5 million. So when you have 9,132 complaints and you closed 1,368 of them, that leaves you about 7,764 that are still outstanding. So do you believe with the extra money and the extra staff that you're going to be able to get this to a manageable time? I see here you said you wanted to get it to 6 to 9 months, but sometimes that's, a long time for based on what the complaint is.
Thank you for the question. So I just want to clarify, for the 9,000, those are just the bases that someone comes into us with. So it says 9,000, but a claimant may have more than one basis that they file an investigation for. So currently, our inventory of open active investigations is about 2,900, a little over 2,900 at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Minority Vice Chair Bowen.
Thank you so much. And follow up to the question, so that chart is showing us it's over roughly 11-year period that you've had the 9,100 cases. So I know that I had recently requested also kind of by year how many complaints. You said while you're addressing the backlog, you continue to get increases. So I wonder if you have an idea of, on average, let's say over by year, how many complaints you've been getting, and then also how many you're closed out. And what progress are you making? Because last year you, before the committee, were granted additional staff and just trying to really continue to monitor the progress.
I really appreciate the question. Thank you. I would really like to give you kind of a picture of addressing our backlog that you heard about last year when we were here. In fiscal year 23, at the beginning, we had 2,018 open complaints. And then in December of that same year, we cleared that backlog out to 0. For the 2019 cases, when we began in fiscal year 23, we had 344. Since January of 24, we only have 27 of those 19 cases. In 2020, we started in the 2020 cases that we had in fiscal year 23, that number was at 428 cases. As of January of 24, we're down to 136 cases from 2020. And in 2021, for fiscal year 23, when we started, we had 615. We are now, from January of 24, we had a balance of 377. And we've been making progress on those on a continual basis. To address the question about what we're getting as far as an average at intake, we're averaging intakes that we received for fiscal year, the first quarter, so the first 3 months of fiscal year 24, we received 1,941, giving us an average of 648 complaints per month. Now, I also want to say, though, state that in January of this year, of 2024, that rose to 738. And in February, it was over 660. So those intake complaints are continuing to rise currently. I do want to say that for investigations, from January, as of January 31st of 2024, we are at almost 2,900 cases. We are one case short. 504 investigations were completed for fiscal year 24 in the first quarter. So we completed, our staff did a fabulous job of completing 504 cases. We had 1,277 backlog cases in the end of January, which was January 31st of 2024, which was a decrease in those backlog numbers from 1,327. And we continue to address the backlog issues. Currently, as of February 18th of this year, we have an increased enforcement staff of 90. 45 of those are civil rights investigators, and we actually have a new class coming in to begin at the beginning of April of an additional 11 coming in at that time. So that is our plan, Director.
Thank you, and I will supplement some of the things that Attorney Trevino said. When I came in, there were 29 investigators in the department handling all of the cases. Thanks to your appropriations, we've been able to increase that staff, as Attorney Trevino just said. Our first increase was last fiscal year of 3.1 one-time money, 3.1 million one-time money. And we used that to hire some limited term employees because it was one-time money, so we couldn't bring in permanent FTEs or full-time FTEs, so we use that. This is the first year in which we were granted some additional ongoing money, 5.5, and we've used that to obviously hire more staff, and we've turned some of the folks who are limited term into full-time FTEs, so there's been some conversion along the way. Steadily advertising and interviewing and hiring more staff, as I've explained, is sort of like flying the plane while you're building it, because the cases continue to come in, but we're still continuing to devote time to recruiting, hiring, interviewing, while we're still trying, managers, while we're still trying to manage the caseloads of the investigators. But not only have we hired more staff in order to handle the cases, and you've seen they've done a great job in terms of cutting down on the old cases. It's the new ones that are coming in now because that intake has increased. We've also used the money that's given us to hire a mediator. So now we're engaged in some mediations for our cases. We've talked to the alternative dispute resolution folks here in Michigan with plans to hopefully to work out a contract in order to be able to transfer some cases over to ADR. So they can be resolved perhaps through that process to avoid a long-term investigation. We approximately maybe about 1,300 cases may be eligible for that ADR process. Now, I'm not saying all will go, and not saying everybody will agree to that process, but obviously it will expedite the situation for them, and some people may agree to go through that process. So those are some of the things we have planned in order to be able to continue to attack that backlog. The goal is to, in terms of backlog cases, is ultimately to have only those that are 1 year old. And Attorney Trevino's doing a great job, and her staff, and the new people we brought on board. They've approached this from a team effort as opposed to the old individual effort that existed before we all came on board. We all started in 2021. So we inherited what we have now, but they changed the method of leadership over there, changed the method of investigations, and we've had 33 promotions. When we came in, the morale was very low. Now it's just the opposite because we have been able to bring some, thanks to you, some extra money, promote some folks into some leadership positions. Some folks before thought there was no opportunity for advancement. Well, they've seen that there is. So together, working again through her leadership and through and her direct supervisor is Attorney Woolridge, we've been able to manage these bad cases, bring on more people, and again use some creativity to look at some alternatives, make sure that those backlog cases are handled.
So I have a follow-up question to that, and I appreciate very much the efforts that we've also expanded the definition, so there are likely more complaints coming in. But I think you said there's roughly been a 25% reduction or clearing of the cases, and so with the available staff, but now you're haven't indicated there's that much of an increase, but it's a 21% increase in staffing levels.
But 20%, Abdel? 20, she said a 21% increase in staffing levels? It's more than that.
Yeah.
Almost a 45% increase in staffing levels.
In the recommendation.
Oh, that would be, I see. Yeah, that'd be 29 additional FTEs. 2 would go to our financial management services department, and the remaining 27 would go to enforcement.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And so are you tracking some way that you can share with us the type of complaint and by year and what's getting cleared off and to see if this is actually, we're going to be on a upswing, hopefully as we do more education to people, right, and outreach, we'll see less complaints and less incidents, of course. That's our goal, right? But it's, I think that it would be very wise for us to be tracking that so, A, we can show our success or where we need to do more outreach.
Yes, thank you for the question. We could get those figures to you of looking at the backlog numbers of where we've been and also the increase in the complaints that are coming in. Yes, one of the things I do want to say, there's also the other side of that coin of doing the outreach and educations, especially to communities that we haven't reached in the past or done as well of a job, is that also increases. So along with education for employers or in education settings, there's also the awareness brought to claimants to be able to come in and file those complaints with us as well.
Right, but one thing is, like, every time an employer files the taxes or an employee does or new hires, it would be a great automatic way to educate people and do outreach at that point instead of, you could get a lot more bang for your buck, I think, or a lot of bang for the buck. Thank you.
And may I also add that I did take a look at some numbers recently and saw there was a 52% increase in complaints from the LGBTQ community over the past 4 years.
Yeah, I bet. I have actually some follow-up questions. With the addition of particularly the 27, or your proposed addition of the 27 folks who could help with the complaints, how quickly do you feel like that would address the backlog?
That's a great question. So when we came in, the training program that we use or the training that we have for our new investigators specifically was done a little bit differently. Okay. However, now what we're doing is a 6-week training program with new investigators, and we're giving them cases to use as training that are actually cases. So
that makes sense.
Once they get out of the 6 weeks, they are already on the road to the progression of completing investigations. With that being said, there's also currently, Director mentioned the team concept of how we move along. So on average, every investigator has to complete 5 cases per month or 15 per quarter. But for new employees, that's a gradual. So they begin maybe at 6 for the first quarter. The second quarter, it raises to maybe 10, and then up until they get to 15. That has worked so far successfully. So as far as the time, we'd have to look at that trend now that we're getting more investigators on staff to address that and see where we are.
That would be really helpful. And can you also talk about how you balance, we have this rise in cases coming in, not only with the expansion, but with education. How do you balance folks closing out old cases with the new ones coming in?
That's a great question, too, and we have recently looked at that more closely because we are able to hire brand-new investigative teams. And so what we've really done is with those backlog numbers, we've worked with the staff who have those older cases and made those a priority. And we meet on a weekly basis with those investigators to see where we're at, what needs to be done on those backlog cases, if legal needs to come in and do some work with them and help assist get those further along to dismissal. And then the new teams that we have coming on, we're assigning more of the newer cases that are coming in so that we're not continually having a backlog issue. And yes, that has been, we're finally getting to that point, especially if we get this $5 million that will assist with the 3 additional teams of taking on the front end.
And that was a change in how we approached this, because earlier, some of the newer people were getting some of the older cases.
Right.
And they couldn't deal with those.
Of course, yeah.
So that was changed, and part of the seven case requirement includes requirement on certain backlog cases be part of that.
How old is the oldest case?
Currently, from 2019.
Okay, thank you. And then
But
my
again, we have, just wanted to reiterate, we only have about 20 of those. And those
Okay.
also, I think it's important to note, a majority of those are prisoner complaints. And our department had to sit on those until we heard from the courts. So these are not necessarily
interesting.
the cases that are in employment.
Okay,
A
got it.
majority of these from 2019 that I mentioned, the 20 or so that are left there, are majority prisoner complaints, as well as in 2020. Many
Okay.
of those are also.
That's helpful. I have one more question. When you were talking about filing a complaint,
Yes.
I was wondering about the information that goes back out, because you said that there's a copy that's sent to the claimant and the respondent. Is there, I'm wondering about times when claimants might be concerned about further retaliation. So how do you handle confidentiality?
So once a complaint, that's a really interesting question, and for confidentiality, once we have allegations, because we are in the administrative law process, the respondent is put on notice from that complaint that they are being investigated for specific allegations. However, the documents that we send out to both parties have the statement about retaliation and the unlawfulness of retaliation.
Okay.
I also will note, when we have open and active investigations, that is not foiable because we are in an active investigation. And so whatever is provided to us from the claimant and respondent may be discussed with the parties so that we can come to some type of resolution, but those documents are not provided to the other party until the end of an investigation.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much. Minority Vice Chair.
I'm not sure if this is the right group or if you're wrapping up, but I wonder if you could give me an update on the Native American boarding school study and the award of the contract. And
Yes, well, I wasn't prepared, but it has been awarded, I think, to Kaufman and Associates, I believe is the name of the team. That was awarded back in December. They've begun to reach out to a number of the tribal nations in order to do their outreach. That study is under the project direction of Melissa Kieswetter, and she's been moved over to my LEAP. So we're working with her sort of like on a remote basis, but it is moving along. Again, a bid was secured. They're working on it with anticipation of having the report finished, and because it's due, I believe, next January. That's the expectation that it will be completed by the deadline that we were given in this legislation. But that's the stage that they're in. They're really doing the outreach, meeting with the tribes, getting a sense of the environment, and then beginning to interview some tribes along the way. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Director. Mr. Vino, thank you and your team for the information. I do recall, Mr. Director, when you first came on board, you had a monumental task to clean up. And just from that point to now, I definitely can see the results of the work. And so I want to commend your team for that.
Thank you.
Also, I just wanted to just express appreciation for the communication that you guys provide in the newsletter form that's pretty consistent. And read them from cover to cover, and the things you've been doing in the local communities, like housing fairs you just did in Flint. I wasn't able to make that one, but now you got the one coming up in Grand Rapids, You got the Crown Neck coming up. You got the summit coming up in June. So all of that is very impactful and informative for us as legislators that want to be engaged and stay engaged with all of those issues that, you know, you represent in terms of making sure people are treated fair. So I just wanted to publicly say thank you to you and your team for the hard work that you've been doing.
Thank you, Representative. We
Thank you, Madam
appreciate
Chair.
those comments. That newsletter, we started that a couple of years ago. Our list is growing. Anyone who wants to be a part of that, please let us know. It's put out by Harold Core, our Special Projects Director, with assistance of Dr. Reed, who's in the room with me today, and Vicki Levengood, our Communications Director. They do a fine job of making sure that the public is informed what we're doing and civil rights issues that are brewing here in the Capitol.
Absolutely. Thank you, colleagues. Any other final questions? Thank you so much. Thanks for your work.
Thank you
It's
for your-
vital here in our state, and we appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks so
it.
much.
Thanks so much.
Colleagues, we have one final presentation. Director Lang is here from DTMB. I will let you introduce your team. Welcome again, colleagues. Presentation in front of you, and will be on the screen as well.
Good morning, Chairperson Rayback and members of the committee. Thank you so much for having us today. With me at the table today is Laura Clark, our state CIO, and I recognize that we are your last presentation of your last meeting, and we are the last thing that is standing between each of you and getting lunch before session this afternoon. So,
Except I will say, from a psychologist perspective, recency effect is in your corner. So you have that going for you.
perfect. All right. Well, again, we know you have limited time, so we'll get right into this. I can't get let's see. Oh, there we go. All right. I made this joke at our last hearing that one of us shows up with a computer for these things and one of us does not, and so you can see why. She is the state CEO and our CIO, and I have paper in front of me. So this first slide here today lays out DTMB's mission, vision, and values. We won't walk through all of this because you've seen it before, but the takeaway here should be our tagline of help, connect, solve. That is what we do every single day. We help drive efficiency, we connect customers to services, and we work together to deliver solutions. We recently did a strategic plan update that included adding a value to our mission, vision, and values, and it's belonging. And we're reminding employees of the importance of embracing diversity and fostering collaboration as well. This slide provides a bit of the scope of what DTMB does. As you can see, DTMB has a very wide reach when it comes to state government. We are, at last count, the 4th largest state department with approximately 3,000 employees. We have a budget of $1.8 billion, more than 50% of which is IT related and comes from IDGs from other state departments. We do work on behalf of more than 50,000 state employees, whether it be through their computers, mobile devices, or facilities. Additionally, of note, we manage 5 retirement systems that serve 1 in every 8 Michigan households. That is actually, up from last year when it was 1 in every 9. So we're doing a lot of work in that space. This next slide goes into some further detail on what DTMB does. The agencies and commissions listed in the bottom right are independent of DTMB, and the directors are cabinet level positions that do not report up through our organizational structure. This slide and the following two show some of the successes that we have had in 2023. The first I'd like to point out is that we opened the new Caro Psychiatric Hospital for our partners DHHS. The former facility was built in 1913 and was overdue for replacement. Secondly, and this one is near and dear to my heart because my father is a veteran, but DTMB became a gold level veteran friendly employer as designated by MVAA. And we're saving money every day through WriteFax. It's a digital online or a digital document service that's saving us costs from printing, paper, mailing, and sorting, and all of those kinds of good things. Laura's going to discuss a few highlights on the IT side of the house now.
All right, thank you, Michelle. So as many of you are aware, there's a large workforce gap between the number of open cybersecurity positions to the number of qualified professionals available to fill those positions. So if you know of anybody who's looking to go into college and for a future career, please encourage them into cybersecurity and IT, or anybody that's looking to adjust into a new career. But last year we were able to host our first conference for high school students. This conference was designed to connect students that are interested in cybersecurity as a professional, connect them with potential future employers, as well as colleges and universities within our state that have cybersecurity programs for further education. We were able to have and host about 400 students, which I thought was great for our first event. And we are starting to plan our second event for this calendar year. The second thing is we find it's very important to have validation of our services through independent resources. So Michigan is is the only state to receive this third-party validation for our Client Service Center. And there's only a few programs, federal programs, that have actually been certified with this certification. And then the last one on the slide is some of the improvements we made to our MyLogin system through some human-centered design research that we did. So MyLogin is our single sign-on to many of our state services and is the point of entry for Michigan residents and visitors who have to interact with state digital services. So some of the results from these changes that we've seen is we've reduced the time it takes to register for a new account by 35% with some improvements. We've increased the successful logins by 13%, and we've actually reduced the number of calls that are being fielded by help desks by over 900 calls per day.
All right, back to me for just a couple more items. In addition to the services we provide to other state agencies, we're also incredibly proud of the work we do to make a positive, long-lasting impact to everyone who lives, works, and plays in Michigan. In 2023, our public, I forgot to move the mic back over. In 2023, our public service efforts, including providing retirees with easier ways to access information they need to make wise decisions, our Michigan Center for Data and Analytics, which you have in the past couple of years supplied some money to us for, which is greatly appreciated, was able to push out reports highlighting high demand, high wage jobs in 10 regions across the state. And working collaboratively with the Attorney General's office, we helped create the program that allows for the address confidentiality program that was enabled by the legislation that each of you, passed just a couple years ago. We don't always toot our own horn at DTMB, so I'm just going to give us a couple of quick shout outs here. Our own Laura Clark took home CIO of the Year from the Orby Awards in November in the nonprofit public sector category. Our procurement team won a gold and a silver award from the National Association of State Procurement Officials for excellence in procurement. The National Association of State Chief Information Officers. When you work in DTMB, you will learn that every group has a National Association of State fill in the blank. So I sometimes muddy those a bit. But the NASIO awarded DTMB Business Process Innovation Award for our work on human-centered design. That's a focus we've had in recent years to make sure that the things that we are providing to the employees, the residents, and people who are using our systems, that it works for them. And then also, the state of Michigan was a finalist for creating and delivering impactful digital services by the Center for Digital Government. Now we're going to move on to the flashy part of our program here. These slides and the next one give some insight into the funding breakout that makes up our FY25 proposed budget. As you can see, our budget is reduced slightly from FY24 due to fewer one-time allocations. Some key points are more than half of the money in our gross appropriation is IT related. Another 14% of our total budget is passed through to support the rent payments to the State Building Authority on infrastructures owned by the state of Michigan, universities, and community colleges. And the remaining roughly 30% is for basic operations such as building maintenance, vehicles, mail, delivery, warehousing, record retention, procurement, financial oversight, and budgeting. This is a funding source breakdown of the governor's proposed budget. Almost $33 million in restricted revenue comes from agency billings or reimbursements for the various central support areas included in our budget, such as finance, accounting, budgeting services offered by the state budget office, support for Sigma, which is the central accounting system the state uses and every agency is part of, support for the Office of the State Employer, who provide a multitude of services to the almost 50,000 state employees, and leasing for floor design services from our real estate division. Less than 1% of our funding comes from either local, private, or federal resources. And finally, 45% of our total $541 million in general fund dollars is essentially passed through to pay for debt service on university, community college, or state of Michigan new or remodeled buildings. Less than 1/3 of our budget is supported by general fund dollars. We have 4 major budget requests this year, 2 of which are ongoing and 2 of which are one-time, but will have a long-term impact here in the state of Michigan. Laura and I will go through each of these requests in detail in the next few slides.
The first budget request that we're going to speak of today is for the Michigan Public Safety Communication System, also known as the MPSCS, which is the critical infrastructure backbone for public safety grade communication across Michigan. The primary mission of the MPSCS is to provide interoperable communication for public safety first responders so that they can communicate across jurisdictions during daily activities or during large planned or unplanned events. The last maintenance fund that was provided was a one-time fund in 2015. Since then, the system has actually grown by more than 50%, with now more than 146,000 radios connecting to the system. This request is to provide ongoing funding for the lifecycle maintenance of the critical infrastructure supporting this communication system. The next request that we want to talk about is related to language accessibility. So this initiative will provide the ability to view over the 105 Michigan.gov websites in alternative languages, providing access to critical information regarding Michigan services. Additionally, it'll incorporate a multilingual AI chatbot into our websites, streamlining customer interactions and boosting overall effectiveness. AI chatbots will save Michigan residents and visitors valuable time by providing quick responses to queries and driving them directly to the content that they need in the language of their choice. This increases the productivity and the effectiveness of the Michigan.gov content, which would be readily available in multiple languages without the need to directly connect with agencies to provide information translated. This availability will help build trust, reliability, and foster inclusivity. The final one that I'll highlight before I hand it back to Michelle is actually part of our IT investment fund. And it's for $10 million as it relates to artificial intelligence to help refine our strategy, improve our platforms, our tools, and pilot this technology. AI has been in development for many, many decades and has become a mainstream digital approach for modernizing of business processes and systems. AI allows for the automation of the perceiving, synthesizing, and inferring information much quicker and more accurately than a human. As the world has transferred and transitioned into a data-intense, highly connected environment, it is important for the state of Michigan to continue to leverage the power that AI brings to our environment. Over the past year, AI has advanced rapidly and is readily available for public consumption through tools such as ChatGPT. As with other information technology advancements, AI brings many of the same challenges and concerns around privacy, ethics, and cybersecurity. Government must focus on protecting our sensitive data to ensure it remains private. Therefore, AI policies and governance structures must be established to empower organizations to protect these individuals. We need to balance the policies of protecting the sensitive data while also utilization of the trending platforms. The budget request allows DTMB to refine our executive branch AI roadmap and to establish a support structure for this emerging technology. Additionally, DTMB has been working with state agencies to catalog potential use cases. A portion of the funding will be used to pilot the most commonly requested use cases, including chatbots, intelligent document processing, data analytics, computer visioning such as video and static images, and code generation.
All right, back to me. Our next request is $10 million in one-time general fund for the Enterprise Risk Management Property Self-Insurance Fund. Over the last 6 years, the state has received double-digit premium increases on our property insurance policy, averaging a 21% annual increase from 2016 to 2022. For the 2023 renewal, our insurer increased the premium by 75%. For the 2023 renewal, which forced our risk management program to market our property program and seek coverage from another insurer. While coverage was ultimately procured, the premium was $1.89 million, which was more than 3 times the premium in 2016. This proposal would allow Michigan to create 2 self-insured retention funds. The first one is for structural property. The SIR would cover the first $5 million of a structural property loss. This proposal will eliminate costly premium increases when markets decline, similar to what we have experienced in the last few years. Additionally, the second SIR would be just for the contents of the building, which is currently uninsured and is the responsibility of the agencies should something occur. The state has property insurance that covers roughly $2.1 billion of structural property for 43 buildings, primarily those under the State Building Authority, historic buildings, and any agency-requested building. This proposal would expand coverage to all state assets, including DTMB-owned and managed buildings. Examples of what we currently insure are the Capitol, the Senate, and this House building that we're in today, many of the structures on Mackinac Island, and the Grand Rapids and Chesterfield homes for veterans. Many other states use a self-insurance model, including Colorado, Florida, Maine, and Louisiana. Once the fund is created, a rate will be applied to our agency partners in FY26, and the fund will be self-supporting. We have a number of other smaller budget requests, but let me get into those. The first is $1.6 million in restricted funds and 10 FTEs for our Office of Retirement Services. Additional staffing in our contact centers will enable us to shift our service level goal of answering calls in 10 minutes to answering them in 5 minutes. We know that each of your offices receive calls when things are going slow in our offices, so we're trying to help you out a little bit in that space and help our customers out, as well. We'll also be increasing outreach to ensure new employees who are investing their retirement in a way that is setting them up for success. And we'll be doing some employer outreach to enhance and ensure customer accounts are accurate and up to date. The next item on the list is $8 million in general fund one-time funding for special maintenance. I know we've talked about this a number of times. It probably shouldn't be called special maintenance, as it's just the regular wear and tear on state buildings, such as roofs and HVAC systems. But considering the magnitude of the buildings the state owns, we have 800 buildings, 5,000 structures, and 41 million square feet to manage. It's a big house, and therefore we need multiple repairs on any given year. Using corrections as an example, in a typical year, we spend $5 million or more on roof replacements of their facilities. And in 25 years, when we finish the last roof, it's time for us to start over. The appropriation of these one-time funds allows agencies to utilize their own funding to support their core missions, as opposed to having to prioritize those expenses along with the maintenance of these facilities. The next is $2 million in general fund one-time for state fleet electric vehicle transition. This funding will be used to identify and implement the best path forward for transitioning the state fleet. We want to move forward with an informed decision on best how to close the gaps and complete this transition. As you can imagine, in a state like Michigan, we have to make sure we're getting agencies the right cars that can go as far as they need to, that there are the infrastructure is in place for them to charge them if they were to take a vehicle. And as we've learned in recent years, when it's a little colder in some places, perhaps like the UP, that can provide a challenge for EVs as well. So we're currently doing a study on the usage of state vehicles, how far they travel, where they're parked when they're parked, so that we have an idea of what we need to do when it comes to modernizing the fleet and creating the infrastructure for those charging stations. And finally, on this list, we have $251,000 in general fund dollars one time for the installation of AEDs, which would allow us to outfit every state building with these critical life-saving devices, and would put us in compliance with the American Heart Association recommendation that you are within 3 minutes of an AED in a facility. The next 3 slides are purely informational. This is an example of where all of the federal ARPA dollars are being spent across the state. Odds are pretty good there's something going on near your district, if not in it, as you can see by the numbers here. Our design and construction team works with the agencies involved with these projects to oversee them as well. And then these last 2 slides are just some further detail on the ITIF program. Again, we have only requested the $35 million in base funding that we've been receiving for years here. And this is just a little detail about the projects that have been selected by the ITIF committee. This last slide gives you our contact information. Neil D'Souza is our legislative liaison. He is currently out on paternity leave, so please, if you're going to reach out to him, you can shoot it to that email address, and that'll get to one of us, and we'll be able to answer your questions. But we do expect Neil to be back and working with each of you, I think, mid-April. So we're looking forward to that. And we're happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. We do have some questions.
Great.
Rep. Hood.
Thank you, Chairwoman Braybeck. I have a couple of questions, and I think you began to answer it with the last slide on the ITIF. You've got about $135 million in enterprise-wide information technology investment projects, up from just over $48 million in fiscal year 22 and 21. Roughly $22 million in fiscal year 21. What's the status of these projects, and what future plans are established to make use of the work project balance? And then, if I may, I'd also like to ask you a little bit about the My Login program and human-centered design, but maybe after you answer the first question, we can hit the second.
Sure. I'm going to defer to Laura on the questions on the IT projects.
Yeah, so we have an ITIF board, and we monitor all of those projects, and we have discussions if the projects go into a red or yellow status. So on a monthly basis, we're reviewing those. We also supply an annual report, so we can work to get you a copy of that annual report so you can see more detail on that if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. And then what's your question about do you just want me to talk about the concept that we had with human-centered design in My Login?
Well, I'm really excited that you're using human-centered design to establish better customer service management practices, and I was intrigued by My Login, and I wanted to understand the scope of it. Is the My Login program facing customers outside of the state, everyday citizens, or is it facing more of your kind of like business-to-business type customers? Can you characterize that a little bit?
Of course. So My Login actually we refer to it as 3 portals, but we use it for state applications, so state employees use it. So we have our worker portal. We have our business portal, which is used by multiple applications for businesses that have to come in and conduct services. And then the third portal we have is for our public-facing systems. And we have about 10 million user identities right now logged within My Login. So anybody that has to interface with our systems, they go through that portal first. And so that's why we wanted to do a human-centered design study on that, because we were seeing that Our interface was not maybe as easy or as intuitive as maybe we thought from an IT standpoint. We had a really good technology stack behind it, but our users were struggling, and we were seeing impacts on our agency's call desks, as well as we saw a high abandonment rate of people who were either trying to log in for the first time and create an account, or they were not able to get to the service, so they had to pick up the phone or walk into a brick and mortar. So what we did is we had a third-party contracting company come in and conduct a human-centered design study or assessment on that, where they actually had people from the public and gave them some scenarios to try to complete with very little instruction, and had them with a computer and basically a web browser, and said, try to go in and do X. And through that, we were able to watch and see and listen to how the user felt about the service, where they were having frustrations. And then we were able to take that information, it was both quantitative and qualitative data, and actually go through and do some redesign and streamline some of our workflows for those users. And so we implemented those changes in June, and so since June we've been monitoring, and that's where those numbers came from that I quoted there. So we've seen great impact. We actually are doing a follow-up assessment. We're calling it HCD 2.0 for My Login, to see and validate that the changes that we made are working for the actual individuals, and then seeing where the next roadblock is for them in the system itself. Also see how the users can transition between agency services, because we have multiple agencies in there, and the users often have to go from one department to another. So we're trying to see how that workflow happens as well.
I'd love to talk with you briefly after the meeting, but I want to get on to my colleagues' questions. Thank you.
Sure. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I wanted to just really commend Ms. Clark and for your work on that award. I mean, that says a lot to be recognized by your colleagues and for us as a department. And also, I was wondering if any of the other members of your team are here under the National Association of State Chiefs. That's under you, right?
Oh, the National Association of State Chief Information Officers?
Yes.
I think we just have Laura here today.
Okay, okay. So really, really, the work you do is monumental, as we all know, looking at your budget requests. And with this AI coming online, that's scary. It's just seeing some of the ancillary things that have been going on with it, but just on a larger scale at a platform like the state of Michigan, that's got to be a challenge that probably keeps you nervous. So I just wanted to commend your team, first of all, and let you know we appreciate you. And then second, on the school, I really was interested in that part, the part where you were recruiting students to the tech side. Is that something it's going to be an ongoing activity that you're going to utilize and expand your reach to different schools throughout the state?
That's Laura's goal.
Yes, so we are in the process of planning our second one, so we want to expand it out a little bit. We did have some lessons learned, so we host the Michigan Cyber Summit, which is more designed for cybersecurity professionals that are actually practitioners in their work right now. And what we saw was an increasing rate of high school students or high schools wanting to participate in that day, but it wasn't really designed for their interests. It was more main stage kind of events with speakers and panels and things. So what we wanted to do was try to design something that would keep the interest of the high school students. So we had more of an interactive day. And we worked closely actually with Michigan State Police, with MEDC, with the Michigan National Guard to bring in additional resources from their program areas too. And then we had partners from the private sector companies. So we had Deloitte and Accenture, Microsoft, and we actually have an organization within Michigan called the Michigan Council for Women in Technology. who work to promote IT profession for women, both younger students that are thinking about moving into IT, as well as women who want to transition into an IT career once they've already been post-college. And so we worked with those groups to really connect the high school students with potential opportunities or what a job might look like within cybersecurity, because sometimes people think cybersecurity is only those that are monitoring the networks and things like that, but there's a lot of other types of jobs, such as assessing the compliance of our applications and making sure they're designed correctly, doing training for our employees and things like that. So we wanted to open up the opportunity or the idea of what cybersecurity was, as well as we have several colleges and universities. So we thought it was really critical to be able to connect those students with where they would want to go if they were thinking about this. So it was a great opportunity. The Michigan Women, or the Michigan Council for Women in Technology, they host camps each year where they bring in female students and have them work with different colleges and universities for a week and have professionals come in. They actually sponsored about 100 camper students, and so we had a pretty large contingency of females in attendance that day, which was really awesome because we're trying to ensure that we can encourage those individuals to be able to go into cybersecurity and IT. So it was great. Some of the lessons learned is that we have some geographic limitations on who can attend in person because of things like transportation to and from school and needing to fall within the school day and things like that. So we're trying to think about how we can open it up to maybe multiple locations and even maybe simulcast some things. So we're trying to push the envelope a little bit to open up that opportunity, or to at least host maybe even more than one cyber summit in various regions.
Well, I like the concept. Obviously, you're very excited about it and passionate.
I am,
That's
yes.
great. You know, and for us, I'm not speaking for the group, but I'm just saying, I'm sure we would be interested in some of our regions participating in that type of activity, you know, if we have the opportunity, you know, our schools.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, if you would.
We can work with Neil once we have the dates and the agendas and more of information that we can share to you, so you can share that with your schools, because that would be very helpful.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Last year, we hosted it in Novi was the location for our event. So we had Southeast Michigan in that area. And then I'd just like to briefly touch on your comment about, you know, AI being scary and keeping us up at night. And, you know, I make the joke that it doesn't keep me up at night because I know it's keeping Laura up at night. But, you know, in all seriousness, and, you know, it is, you know, a huge new thing that we are all facing every single day. And we were able to do some roundtables with businesses and industry this past late fall. And, you know, one of the topics that came out of it that we are going to be not only, you know, including in our roadmap, but keeping a consistent eye on is the responsible use of AI. You know, as you heard the Civil Rights Commission talk about today about, you know, how it can lead to discrimination practices and things along those lines. So we are very cognizant of the fact that anything that we do with the state of Michigan has to be very responsible when it comes to AI.
Thank you.
And then your comment around the NASCIO, the National State of Chief Information Officers. We work very closely together, so we have some work groups that we have some DTMB representation that sit on those work groups. I talk to my peers within the other states quite frequently to hear kind of where they're at in that AI journey. And we're all sharing, we have different models within our state and how centralized or decentralized IT is within their governments, but we're able to share a lot of the lessons learned and a lot of the practices and language and things like that. So that's where those associations really become powerful.
Colleagues, we have 2 more questions and we have 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ask. There's lots of great stuff. I'm just gonna ask my colleagues to please keep it very short, and we can get if you don't get your questions answered, we can get them answered. Yeah. So we have Rep. Menser, excuse me, and the Minority Vice Chair Bolin.
I'm just a little confused here. On your total proposed gross appropriation, you have 1.7 billion. In the governor's executive budget recommendation, she has 1.857 billion. Are you guys taking a cut here of 157 million?
If I'm not mistaken, and Maria Tishkevich, who is in our budget office here, I think that relates to one-time funding that was in last year's budget in comparison to this year's budget.
All right, that's not clear in here.
Apologies, we can certainly make that adjustment for you.
Thanks, Rep. Minority Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. And I echo Rep. O'Neill's comments. You are kind of the glue that keeps the whole state together, so thank you for that. My question is in regards to the money that was appropriated on kind of optimizing workspace and modernization, and how we're coming on that study evaluating workspaces.
Sure. We are in the early stages of the study. It has been awarded. There have been meetings setting it up, setting the objectives and goals, and they are working with state agencies to get a lay of the land. Because while we understand it, the individuals that we brought in, this is a new space to them. Although they've done this work in other areas as well, so we are in the midst of that, and we would love to have that wrapped up absolutely as quickly as possible.
Okay, colleagues, I think that wraps up all the questions that we have. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it, and thanks for answering all the questions. As you know, colleagues, this was the last of our presentations. We'll now work to kind of really get into the specifics of the budgets. We've heard from the departments. We've heard their asks. We will be getting all the information that we need and working with our targets, and then we'll be going from there. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you. If you have specific asks, please make sure to send those to me so that I know those as we're going through this process. So please get those to me. All right, thank you, everybody, for all your work. I really appreciate it. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.